Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available from teachers, parents, alumni, and of the school. Also at islandetickets.com. Mott Liquor Palace, Diego Martin Main Road. GN Food Center, Safaria. Uncle Beto, Santa Cruz. Better Deal Supermarket, Cunupia, and Aranguez. Cans Liquor, Diego Martin Main Road. Ramsing Sports, Chaguanas, and Cuba. Bobby's Barbecue Wrap, Mirage Supermarket, Sangre Grande. West B Supermarket, Diego Martin, and Tacarigua.
John's Supermarket, Upper Bonds Road.
Payless Hardware, Diego Martin Main Road. Dodge Roti, Pitti Valley. Mirage Westside Arima. Western Pharmacy next to St. James Police. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queens Royal College 3-car raffle.
So once your sugar is not controlled, it causes changes in the blood vessels in the back of your eyes. It basically makes your blood vessels more leaky. And it happens on a stage process where the smaller molecules start to leak, then the intermediate, and then the larger ones. Larger means we have come to a bleed.
WESN.
So, as I've mentioned once before, at times people like to contact the station and send me stuff that they think is relevant to give my attention. Now, generally speaking, it doesn't take me long to assess it to my contention. That is to say, I am content that I have seen what I think is the point of whatever it is that was sent. And what I find, and this is something I've noticed long before, with COVID, with the war in Ukraine, there's a lot of stuff online where the people who put it out there don't really know what they're talking about. And sometimes it even comes off as outright fake. It could be a copy and paste job, or it could be an attempt to be more sensational than everybody else, regardless of accuracy and truth, because that's what's going to get attention, and attention means I'm going to get more views, I'm going to get more likes, I'm going to get more comments. Therefore, I am going to be able to make it more commercially viable. And it's not too dissimilar to sensationalized headlines, except it's technically more disingenuous, because now you're not skating the fine line between the truth and so much embellishment that it's lies. Now you're just potentially actively on lies. We'll get into it. I'll explain in detail. I have a whole presentation. So let's start off with just the opening of the video itself, and cue this.
Power. For 75 years, the United States maintained absolute control over global maritime routes, the Strait of Hormuz, the Suez Canal, the Strait of Malacca, all under the protection of the Fifth Fleet, the Sixth Fleet, the Seventh Fleet. Washington decided who sailed and who didn't. But this week, the map changed in a way the Pentagon never imagined. Venezuela just announced joint military exercises with Russia in the waters surrounding the Florida Strait and the Yucatan Channel, the arteries through which 60% of Gulf of Mexico oil flows to U.S. markets. We're not talking about symbolic maneuvers. We're talking about Admiral Gorshkov-class frigates equipped with Zircon hypersonic missiles, Yasin-class attack submarines, and electronic warfare ships capable of blinding NATO defense systems. Venezuela's defense minister, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, was absolutely clear in his Tuesday statement. The era of unipolar control over the maritime routes of the Western Hemisphere is over. I worked at the International Monetary Fund for many years. I've seen this pattern dozens of times. When an empire loses control of the trade routes that sustain its economy, what follows isn't negotiation. It's accelerated collapse. And what we're witnessing this week isn't a military exercise. It's a dress rehearsal for the new world order that Washington has desperately tried to prevent.
Now, before I get into the issues with the video itself, right? And some of you might realize that the speaker is less than genuine. And by genuine, I mean the literal sense of the word, not the words that he's talking about. I mean the literal sense of, is he the genuine article? And by the genuine article, I'm not even talking about his credentials. I'm going even more basic than that. But I won't get there yet. I won't get there yet. So first, I should have a picture of the Florida Strait and the Yucatan Channel. So that's basically 2 choke points around Cuba. That is as close to America's backyard as you could get. Now, one of the interesting things is, a lot of people complain that America has too much control over other people's territory. And you could maybe say that about the Yucatan Channel, but the Strait of Florida is at least halfway American. Now, the video is basically, it pulled out a lot of different names of ships and missiles and stuff like that, not necessarily actually explaining what they do and why they're dangerous, right? Let's not forget, the speaker is presented as an international money guy, not a military analyst. And before I go any further, let me just say, I don't know who sent the video, and this is not about to ridicule them, blame them, or anything like that. I'm very happy that it's anonymous. The point I'm trying to make is about the video itself, and what I've been saying, that there's a lot of these things online that just, they're there to get your engagement and views, and they don't necessarily care if it's the truth, if it makes you panicked, or anything like that. So, generally speaking, I am pretty confident in the statements I'm about to make as to why. When I saw the video title, I was actually very curious, because I'm like, what strait is under Venezuelan control? Because usually when you talk about straits and who controls them, you look at the countries that literally their landmass makes up the strait. The Strait of Malacca, it's Indonesia and Malaysia and Philippines. The Suez Canal, that's Egypt and Israel. And then, of course, further south, then you get into the potential interference of other countries. And of course, in this case, it's Cuba and Florida. Now, Venezuela basically, for the purposes of this conversation, does not have a navy that could go to the Strait of Florida. Let's just get that out of the way. If they did, they would have to go through the American Navy to get there, first of all. Second of all, traditionally speaking, the Soviet Union, which then became the Russian Federation, does not have a military designed to project power. It's not about the number of planes you have. It's not about the number of troops you have. It's not about the number of missiles you have. Projecting power is about logistics, logistical systems, and if you are set up for that. And the Russian Navy was never set up for that. One of the things you need to project power as a Navy is aircraft carriers, because you can't take your air bases at home, pack them in your bag. You need to take airplanes with you if you want to compete. Russia has one aircraft carrier that's not operational right now. Aircraft carriers are so important. China, who is faced with serious strategic controls of the Straits of Malacca being close to them, whether Indonesia decides to be unfriendly to them or India decides to put a blocking force there, and China's rushing to make carriers in order to project naval power. And let's not forget, this is not just projecting naval power if you're going to somehow close the Straits of Florida. You're projecting power right next to America, which means that unless America is fighting a war somewhere else and send their troops somewhere else, you're fighting everything that America has if you are going to close the straits. Because it's one thing if the countries involved say we're closing the straits to naval passage. I believe Egypt, if they really wanted to, they could say we're closing the Suez Canal. And then the only thing other people could do about it is use force to try to say no. If Panama technically wanted to close the Panama Canal, the only thing I believe legally, well, there's no legal recourse. You could maybe sue, but that sort of rights will be vested in the countries involved. So the only way for Russia and Venezuela to come together to close the Straits of Florida is to military say, we're going to fight a war over it. And there's no chance that Russia wants to fight a naval war with America right next to America and far away from their own landmass. They don't have the ability to project all that power, and they don't have the ability to project enough to fight with more or less whatever America could throw at them from all of the American bases in the southeast. And then if you get into long-range bombers and stuff, it might go even further, all the way up to Colorado. So that video, just off of the strategic concept that it wants to put out there, right? It's like saying rock beats paper. That's nice, but this is the real world. In the real world, they say ain't gonna happen. Now, take a look at, as we're here, take a look at the video. Take a look at the speaker. Now take a look at this here. Take a look at this here. You see this little part there being highlighted, that little line? That little line is interesting, right? What is that line? This video is a fictional dramatization created for entertainment and educational purposes. I'm not entirely sure how exactly that works with a fictional dramatization. Events shown here are not literal and do not depict real-time news. Let's go back from the stop with this last clip here. Sound or visuals, look at the bottom. Sound or visuals were significantly altered or digitally generated. I don't know if we could just, without the sound, go back to the original clip, because I want to just look at the speaker. Now, I could be wrong, but given the fact that he's literally not moving like a human, I suspect this is not even a real human talking. I can't remember if the mouth movement lines up correctly with the audio. But after looking up all of this, I then went to try to see if there was any news articles about anything like this, and I couldn't find anything. I mean, I'll be surprised if it was a real declaration, because I don't know how Venezuela is going to even participate in that. This video, to me, is one of several videos where you take a little bit of the truth, you sprinkle a lot of embellishment, and you throw something out there. There were many videos over the last 3 months that basically said, attack imminent, US strikes imminent, Russian strikes imminent, Venezuela gonna do a thing, somebody's gonna do a thing. And for the most part, outside of hitting drug smuggling boats and the one incident with the oil tanker, and these are the things that are never announced to be imminent in the videos, by the way. It's always invasion or there's some grand attack. And no grand attack ever happened. And the point of all of this is just to show that, look, this is, yes, they say it's educational, but they also say it's for entertainment. Let's go back to that last part. In fact, I think we have a photo. I don't know if that would be better, but this video is a fictional dramatization. But here's the problem. It's not presented as a movie based on a true story, right? That's a fictional dramatization, which still isn't always 100% accurate. No, this is presented as a guy who claims to be an expert on strategic issues due to his knowledge of the world economy, presenting us something in the form that is similar to a newscast. That's what this is. So to say that it's a fictional dramatization usually would include things like, you know, reenactments, right? There's no reenactments here. I think I scanned the length and breadth of the video to see if there was even any sort of visual cues, and there was none. It was a speaker presenting an opinion as though it was based on facts. But now, based on the disclaimer, how much of it is based on facts? And a lot of Trinbagonians are going to go online, and a lot of people, because a lot of Americans do it, right? Now, you get everything from flat earth to who shot Kennedy to, you know, where Jimmy Hoffa's buried to this. You get a lot of people trying to spin, oh, Ukraine's winning, when Ukraine may not be winning. You get a lot of people that want to spin a lot of different things. And essentially what this is seems to me more like a political propaganda piece than any sort of real educational video that doesn't have any practical value, that if you spent 30 or so years learning about military history, you would know that it's very, very, very sketchy if it has any sort of technical accuracy or military significance. But at the end of the day, people are going to look at these things, and just because it's on the internet, it has to be true. That is an age-old mistake that just about everybody makes, right? It's hard to fact-check everything. I understand that. I'm not saying that, you know, I'm immune to it myself. I try not to overreact to things on the internet for this very reason. Yes, I see something and I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, look what happened. No, depending on how outrageous it is, I'm going to wait to see if there's any follow-up to see if it's true or not. So, I've said it before. Be careful about stuff on the internet because it gets crazy and it's not always truthful, and it might be misleading because the people who put out content like this, their primary consideration is no different from a corporate media house that has to worry about shareholder value, profit and loss, etc., etc. It's about their money. Your views equal their money. But look, 813 subscribers. This is not even a viral YouTube channel presenting whatever this is. I honestly couldn't even watch the whole thing because it started off bad, and it got even worse, but it is what it is. So, here's the thing. For people who want to send stuff to me, it's fine, but generally speaking, for me to wade through 10-minute videos, 20-minute videos, 50-minute videos, and not knowing what the point you wanted me to see or not, that gets, you know, tiring at times. If you disagree with me and you want to voice it, don't say, why don't I get someone else's opinion? Tell me where you disagree with me. If there's a video with a point, you could send the video, but then say what the point is that you want me to focus on, because I might focus on the wrong point. The point that I'm making now probably was not what the person who sent the video wanted me to focus on. Maybe it was something further down that he wanted me to see and comment on or consider. But given the fact that it started off so poorly, I never got there. If there's anything specific that you want me to be aware of, state it out, write it out, point it out, be specific. Don't just kind of throw these random things at me as though somehow it proves anything. Because I've reached the point now where A lot of the things that come across my feed, I don't take seriously, whether it's Ukraine or when it was COVID or a whole host of various topics, because I've come to learn that there are a lot of people who embellish, mislead, because they just want my views, and I don't want to give them my views for content that, at the end of the day, was meant only for clicks and not actually to inform. And that's one of the reasons why I say media literacy is soon going to be one of the main thresholds, if not the main threshold, whereas in the past it was literacy. Now you don't just need to know how to read, and potentially even more important than reading, the skill of reading might be important in this, depending, but the skill of actually being able to discern what is a trusted, reputable, accurate, ethical, consistent, objective source versus a fly-by-night internet commentator that may or may not be ethical in what they do. That's going to be the main threshold in the information age of today and tomorrow. Let's take a break. When we come back, we have a comment on this. All right. Let's take the comment, because I meant what I said. I did not want this to be about blaming the sender. I was very happy that this was an example of the kind of stuff that everybody needs to be wary of on the internet. The more emotional and evocative it is, usually, the more inaccurate it is. Right? If it's one of those things and there's a lot of pomp and circumstance in it, and it's the more entertaining it's meant to be, on that level, usually the more disingenuous it is, particularly when it's not a real person. But even then, with real people, you have to be wary. You have to be wary. But I actually have no issue with you, whoever sent the video. I really don't. I really don't. I was happy for the chance to see, look, this is what real people are finding, are looking at, are being concerned about, right? Are causing them to have concerns and stress, so that I could say this is actually from a viewer and not what I think people are watching. So it was a very good example to utilize, and I very much appreciate that. At no point was I upset with you. I will say this, I was upset with whoever made the video. But that's just me. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll of course have more relevant topics to our day-to-day goings on. Stuff is happening, or in one case, what did not happen. Stay tuned. This is Talking About a WESN show. Michael Small on WESN. We'll be right back after this.
Win a free car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College. You have a chance of winning a luxurious Royal Ride Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available at islandetickets.com. Lewis Appliances, corner Tragrid Road and Edward Street. Caribbean Jewelers, Trent City Mall. Mandarin Mini Mart St. Anne's. A. Moses & Sons, 181 Tragrid Road. Quaysay Supermarket, Calcutta Road number 2. Strive Restaurant and Bar, Mukarapa Road. New Car and Auto Shop, West Mall. First Priority Music, Gulf City Mall. SNSR Food Center, Princesstown. Quaysay Best Price, St. Mary's Junction. Romaines Hardware, Maribel. Cascade Mini Mart. Kelly Supermarket, Diggle Mountain Main Road. The Unit Trust Agency in West Mall. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queens Royal College Christmas 3-car raffle.
It's Christmas time, and with your family you'll spend every evening watching a movie on WESN. The classics that fill your heart with merriment and cheer as we celebrate together the most wonderful time of the year.
This is my island in December.
This Christmas, WESN celebrates with you as the content capital brings the big screen classics.
Yes!
Gather your family and tune in to WESN from December 1st to 31st at 8 p.m. nightly for We Christmas Movie Classics.
Santa's coming to town! Santa! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him! I know him!
Only on WESN, Content Capital.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today. SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands, and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.
I'm back here talking about the WSND Content Capital, and I am joined, of course, as I am every Friday, by disaster management expert and the national security man of experience here on Talking Point, Mr. Ashraf Ali. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Sean. Be very careful how I use the word national security.
I guess, right? Well, that's a big debate now.
Because
yeah,
everybody seems to be national security expert via social media.
Well, I'll say this. I think, a lot of people are attempting to try to understand something that they've never necessarily had to understand before. It does not help, however, when some of these so-called national security people in the news spend more time kind of, bickering with each other, right?
That's true.
It does not give one a great sense of confidence. But I'll say this, because I think you're here usually, and I said this before earlier in the week, I'm the guy that says, don't tell Roger Alexander to shut up. because that's not what we want. We want our officials to be willing to engage with us because we want more transparency. So shutting up, automatically, there's no hope of transparency.
True.
You know, you might not do a good job with communication, but at least there's a chance.
Yeah, yeah.
But in this case, I was like, there's no value with this exchange. Maybe this is the time when the minister should shut up, because I do believe, if my memory is correct, he descended into personal insults even worse than the former commissioner.
And I think
that's an accomplishment in and of itself.
I think that what made it worse is the manner in which it was done.
Yes.
Right. You may not like I said, I always say, you may not like an individual. You may not agree, or you may agree or disagree with the person's comment, but respect for office holders is what you should have.
Well, in that case, Cardiff was wrong.
Yes, and I've always said that when you lose respect for office holders or persons who hold office, not the individuals, so you respect the office, and that is the problem that we face. We respect a Minister of National Security, not the individual. We respect the Prime Minister, not the office holder. That is a Prime Minister. Whether we like it or not, that's a Prime Minister. A former commissioner who held an office, right? That is what I do not tolerate, and I don't like that.
Because this was in a way more unprofessional than the usual bickering that you would see between two, whether former office holders or current office holders.
And that did not look well. It didn't look. It didn't augur well in social media and in public domain. I think the minister needs to understand that he is the minister, that he holds the position of a Minister of Homeland Security, which is in fact a very crucial position. Everything that he says, the media will hinge on it.
Well, let's just go a step further, because let's say there's a war of words now. Now, on some level, you could argue they shouldn't have it at all. But all right, you want to engage. Could you at least do so using more professional language? If there is a professional point to be made. Because I think that's at some, because usually when there's a war of words, there might be a professional point to be made, but how you do it kind of goes off the rails. Yeah, but in this case, it kind of felt as though we reached a point where there was no practical value anymore. You know, oh, you went to war? Oh, I don't know if I count that as well. Like that, but at that point, we're not debating whatever the issue was that you were debating. You're just debating, oh, who is the bigger, badder, tougher, whatever.
And it boils down, it is now in the conversation has now reached the all-time low, that a lot of persons are asking now, let the minister, yes, the minister could be who he wants to be, but at the end of the day, national security is a serious issue. It cannot be a laughingstock matter at every single point in time. I read some articles and some comments in some of our newspapers, and I think that nobody is criticizing the minister to the extent of how he deals with certain things, but the constant manner in how he addresses questions is the issue. Sometimes you don't get a straight answer when a straight answer is really needed.
Right.
When you give a whole set of dialogue or goes all on Nancy Drew or something like that around the table, you leave too much questions to be asked what really you want to, what is really the answer that you want to give. Sometimes it is very a simple answer, yes, no, or give a context into what the question was posed to you. Simple. No, it might appear that and sometimes it appears that the reason why you use certain things because you don't have knowledge of the information. Fair enough, you may not have. But you must always, in that position, you must always be prepared to answer questions.
I have an issue with ministers not being prepared when stories are not suddenly breaking, right? Especially if it's important issues. But I'll also just say this with regards to not respecting office holders. I showed a video yesterday. The speaker was talking about how democracies, one of the flaws with democracies is at some point the politics turns into popularity contests, and popularity contests are no longer about merit, it's about charisma and what people want to hear and what sounds good and what makes them feel good. And then once you get to that stage, the speaker then went on to say, and then you start to see respect for authority break down.
And this is where persons find themselves running afoul of the law when it comes to social media posts.
Well, not just that. Look, school children, respect for authority or lack thereof. Their respect for authority broke down because our society is predicated. I mean, think about it. What you said is correct, but then it will be countered by at least 20 to 30% of people on the street saying, why should I respect the office? Look what they do with it. More about the office holder, yes, and not so much about the office, and not understanding that regardless of what the office holder successively might do in that office, you still have to try and respect the institution. They're like, why am I respecting these institutions? They're completely corrupted, they're completely subverted, right? And on some level, arguably, a mockery has been made out of them. And then we get what we get where, well, if that's the case, if the big shots could do that, why do I have to worry about, this no parking sign, wearing a seatbelt, not speeding, not parking on the Eastern Main Road, not having my music in my car turned up to 11? That's the noise pollution complaint by me that I have more than anything else.
True.
Whether the trucks with advertising something or a music truck, like the PNM's music truck in the elections, or some idiot just having his music loud, like excessively loud, right? Why do we need to worry about little laws, right? Why do we need to worry about a whole host of things that are in place just to allow our society to function? And then that then goes into who's going to break the major laws, who's going to commit the crimes.
And then you have the comparative analysis where some use other jurisdictions to compare Trinidad and Tobago and how we operate. For example, they compare about how Singapore operates. But the question is, are you willing to abide by the rules and regulations set out by the government of Singapore and the citizen culture towards the rules and regulation? They are law-abiding to the extent of they agree to the laws and follow the laws.
They agree to harsh conditions.
Yes.
Because, this wasn't planned, we were just us starting the show talking, but I'll say this, one of the conclusions of the video was, well, right now it seems almost as though we're being ruled by a mob of kings, right? Because this popularity contest kind of turns things upside down. And they're like, well, why do that when you could pick a king? Because part of the thing is when the politics break down, people look to more authoritarian leaders to kind of get us back on track, and which is what's happening to some extent in America. And not everybody agrees with that. And I would say with Singapore is a good example of, well, look, if you pick the right guy, you could get good results. But imagine if you pick the wrong guy, you get a Nazi Germany, right? So it's not that simple. And it all comes back down to picking the right people, because the premise is meritocracy versus a popularity contest. It really just comes back down to the voters and what they accept and tolerate. And I think too many people probably accepted and tolerated, whether they like Gary or they like the minister, and who's on which side in the back and forth, as opposed to understanding maybe this has gone too far. Now, speaking about, well, I wouldn't say it went too far, but it depends on your point of view. I just want to touch on the fact that there's a CPEP replacement. This is, Karen mentioned it somewhat on Wednesday, the program to clean public spaces, right? Upkeep of public spaces. Definitely not CPEP, by the way. Definitely not CPEP. And the issue I just have with this is, first of all, look how long it took, right? There's talk right now, there's concern that there's economic slowdown, and one of the factors is the income of a lot of CPEP workers and work URP similar situations. They just haven't been getting a salary, so that money's just not in circulation. But this whole restructuring thing, I mean, this is one of my issues that I have. It is definitely not CPEP, and the merit of it is something that is less than CPEP. So how is, is this an improvement?
No.
Because CPEP was more than just cutting grass, but this seems to be cutting grass.
CPEP went to more than cutting grass. It was designed, it was for this purpose. It expanded to other areas because there was need for there was opportunities in other areas, right? Now, like this program, yes, it is not a CPEP anymore. It's strict. It's directly under the corporation. But then there's I am looking at it. There is room for improvement. Like I always said, that when we want to go, I could link this to the community service environment, where persons who have been charged for minor offenses, ticketable offenses, and let's say maintenance and all of those type of things that have serve some time, instead of incarceration, where the state has to put monies out to keep you there. These individuals can be utilized within an environment like this to perform community service, because this is really, in fact, part and parcel of upkeeping the communities.
And that's low-hanging fruit. That's a concept that exists in foreign jurisdictions for a long time. So my thing, though, is that why did it take so long to replace CPEP, right? I understand it's corruption, but it's not that the entire thing was ghost gang. So on one hand, the work wasn't being done. On the other hand, you're losing some of the other functions of CPEP with this replacement. And more importantly, you had people on the breadline for a couple months. And did you have to? Now, part of it is then we have to worry, is it for budgetary reasons? You have to stall the rollout of the upkeep of public spaces, right? So there's a lot behind it, but I don't necessarily want to spend too much more time on this. The next thing to get to, the fire report for the Morris Julian fire, right? Now, from what I understand, and I haven't kept up to date with the story, essentially, the government said, well, we have the fire report, the fire service is cleared, and we're willing, upon request, to provide it to the family. The family then went to the media and said, give it to the public. And I believe, basically, the implication is, I don't know if it was spelled out in the media as to what exactly happened, but the implication is, they made a request, but they haven't seen the fire report yet.
So the question is, this is a misconception of what you consider to be fire report. The fire report will give the circumstances surrounding the fire. What caused the fire, what possible causes of the fire, in terms of whether it was a criminal offense or let's say accidental or some possible malfunction of electrical supplies or something like that in the report. The question that people say, give the report. Remember, there was a concern with the tardiness of the fire service response.
Yes.
That should not be part of this report, because that's an internal situation.
Technically a separate issue.
A separate issue. So if the entire fire report is placed, if the fire report, we'll be talking about what the fire service will provide for an investigation for the police officers when they're doing a fire report. For investigation is different. No, nobody knows exactly what we're talking about, which one of the report we're talking about here.
So the news reports, well, according to Minister Alexander, this is what was reported. The report, which ruled out foul play and exonerated responding fire officers, doesn't necessarily give the context as to what is being referred to there.
Yeah.
Then there's also, in evaluating response time and water availability, the report aimed to address conflicting reports about the circumstance of the fire. Again, it doesn't actually say what details it's presenting, right? I'll say this, I understand where you're coming from. This probably could have been potentially two separate investigations, because it's the fire and the nature of the fire is a different thing
as opposed to
the response, right? But I could also see where, for various reasons, whether it is the correct thing or not. It might be unprofessional, it might be inaccurate, but you lump everything in together into some super report or whatever. And that, to some extent, could be political motivation as well, right? Oh, well, we have a thing, so we're going to investigate the thing, and look at us investigate the thing, and we're investigating all the things. But then, of course, now, when we get the actual report in the hands of the politicians, now nobody wants to give out the report, right? I suspect, if what I think is true, that the report goes beyond just investigating the fire, right, and they lumped everything together. So I suspect this. I suspect that no one wants to have to deal with what probably might be the obvious cause of, well, you need to put more money in the fire service.
So then here's my twist on this. That we have to be very careful when we talk about making reports public.
Mm-hmm.
How many fires after this incident, this unfortunate incident that took place, that was investigated?
Mm-hmm.
Have those reports been made available to the public, because the same narrative can be utilized? The lack of response by the fire service, the persons who believe that the fire was as a result of some criminal act or something like that.
Yeah.
If we keep this going down this road, it means that every single report.
Well, here's the thing. Every single report should be made public, right? But here's the thing. Ironically, the report into the fire itself, for public interest, is less important than the report into the response time.
That is the key.
Right? Because you're right. Like, on some level, if it wasn't criminal, well, then it's not really our business. And even if it was criminal, you have an investigation going on. But the response times and the water supply, those are things. Because what made this fire unique wasn't the fact that it was an MP. It was the fact that apparently there were two other fires at the same time, upon which this one area, I can't remember if it was this station alone or if it was this station and the backup station,
yes,
right, had to go to two other fires. This was fire number 3. And I'll be honest, when I would theory craft this sort of things in my head, I would think, well, what if there's a fire here? What are we going to do? I never thought, well, what if there's a fire here? And then there's a second fire here. What are we going to do about a third fire? I never got to a third fire, right? So now, this is what Dr. Rowley has been reported as saying. It wasn't made public because there was some legal view that it should not be, and I was guided by that, right? Because the report that came from persons who we put to look into it was quite unsatisfactory. To me, it was more of a covering for who was responsible. Now, I'll say this. If you saw this report while still Prime Minister, maybe you should have said this while still Prime Minister.
Being Prime Minister.
Right?
Especially when you got that report, it was disconcerting to you. You voiced your opinion internally. I'm sure you should have, because it didn't read the way that you wanted to read. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that. It didn't give you the satisfaction of. It had more questions that came up. Then we had a minister supposed to be able to should have been addressing that particular concern.
The thing is, I wonder if our laws are so backward that the legal view was that, look, this isn't actually going to help the situation and maybe get us into legal trouble if we release it. And I'm saying it's not that, given what we've spoken about our laws, I won't be surprised if there's some sort of concern about liability while not being able to actually do anything about the situation, because the report itself doesn't, as he said, it was covering for who was responsible. It was unsatisfactory. The implication I have is that it didn't actually say anything.
Who was responsible?
Well, they didn't actually, right, but the thing, I don't think the report pointed to that.
Let's put it this way. Who's responsible for responding to fires?
Well, the fire service, but I would argue potentially that some of the blame for this situation might be with regards to the chief fire officer, because he oversees the service, right? And if there's any sort of procedural issues or policy gaps, then it would technically be his responsibility. And we just don't know how far those things goes.
That is why I'm saying that there are two. It should be two separate incidents that should be made available. I agree that the report into the fire, the actual incident, can be made available to the family or should be made available to the family for closure purposes, right? And if they choose to have any claims or any type of action, they need to do civil action.
I hope that's not the legal reason, by the way.
No, right, because
not wanting to them to sue you.
In any fire, there are procedures to follow when there's death or loss of property. There's a procedure that the surviving members can take, right? That said, that is the personal, that is a personal choice of the survivors of a fire or the family members of the fire, or the victims, right? Then we're talking about response. Response is where the agency's responsibility for response, if there was any shortcoming in the response that aggravated the nature of that, or didn't respond in a timely manner, that caused additional property damage, or even would have contributed because of the response to the deaths, then there's something different and apart. But you can't lump both of them together because it will not give you the true understanding of what we are dealing with. The core concept here, and over the years we have been speaking about the lack of resources of the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service and the equipment that they have. The association has been clamoring for it. You have been hearing it over and over. And after that fire incident, there were multiple fire incidents after that can be said that if, or I'm just using the if here, the possibility exists that if there were sufficient resources, properties might not have been fully damaged. Persons might be salvaged. No, that is a speculation because you really don't know the context of the fire, and there's a lot more in it.
Well, I want to go big picture because you say you can't lump the two concepts together, what's to be investigated, but I can tell you what you can lump together, and that is the both political parties.
Exactly.
Because right now, as much as the opposition is saying, release the reports, and it was a different national security minister who oversaw it at that time and made that decision, at some point he was replaced. And more importantly, cabinet on a whole, I think, and the prime minister, if necessary, could have released the report regardless of what Minister Hines wanted to do or did not want to do. But here's the flip side. Similar to the Brent Thomas matter, we see a controversy that we do not have a satisfactory answer from the former PNM administration. And the new UNT administration is acting in a similar way, giving us a similar result. We don't necessarily know why. We don't know why the Brent Thomas investigation seemingly is turning into, well, this will never be over. Like, we'll never make any headway into this one way or the other, right? We'll never get to the truth. Don't mind that, essentially, the police are investigating the police. Like, they don't have to go into the jungle to find the evidence and what have you. Now, with regards to the fire service, it's kind of almost the same thing, right?
Similar.
You are investigating your state agency. And in some ways, this is the thing about this fire. You would think, oh, well, because when you say it could happen to you, first of all, you'll say, yeah, but it won't happen to the 1% and to the politicians. They're safe, so why would they bother? Well, it happened to a politician. And then, of course, they have the ones that says, well, yes, but you know what? I am fine because I am near a fire station. No, it happened to someone that lived near a fire station. So when I say that this could happen to any one of us, it literally could happen to any one of us. And that should be concerning because we're talking about a situation where there was no attempt to save these people. None whatsoever. I understand there wasn't a fire truck to respond, but they were fire officers. They couldn't even safeguard the scene, guide the onlookers, and maybe see what they could have done, not to out the fire, but to try to at least save who potentially could be saved. Like, all of these things need to be looked into, but similar to the border security breaking down with the Coast Guard, there's seemingly, to the public, zero accountability. So now the question is, exactly how is it that we could go from party to party and we literally get the same result regardless of the reasons of how we got there, we get the same results. And this is where it comes back to what I said with regards to the voters.
Yeah.
Because if there was ever an issue outside of murder, which is a parallel in this case, right? Because murder could happen to any one of us, right? Where's the public to say this cannot be allowed to continue? This specific issue, right? It's almost as though, well, you know what, I was an MP, so, you know, we care, but we don't care that much. Like, how callous could you be? No, I get it. There's some parliamentarians where if they died in a fire, I would understand if a lot of the public would be apathetic towards it. But this is not one of those politicians. So I don't get it. And again, more important, big picture. A lot of the times, these sorts of things, it's not about who the victim was. That's bad enough. That's horrible enough. But then it's also well, you're going to just let this fester until it happens to you? And then you agree with someone fighting to change it after you die? How is that supposed to help you? How is that supposed to work?
So that's what I'm saying. So I am all for the release of the information. The release of information will hopefully give the public some insight as to what transpired. So all the conspiracy theorists may or may not be satisfied, because they still have conspiracy theorists who would not be satisfied with the whole context of it. But the bigger picture is that the lack of resources, the lack of response, and the ability or the inability, or whether or not it was part and parcel of whatever policy or procedures that they have adopted, whether or not, as you say, could they have done it differently or make some additional attempts?
Because if you know you have a lack of resources, then what is the institutional policy to treat with emergencies with a lack of resources? It can't just be, well, sorry for you.
And you know, this brings, as we're speaking, I don't know when you want to bring in that topic, but it brings back to the conversation that one of the topics we're talking about, the mosquito bite.
Hold on, yeah. That's the next thing. So wait, let's just take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation, because I just find it's very interesting how so many jobs just comes down to basic working conditions. But should they be in certain circumstances? Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
Car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College. You have a chance of winning a luxurious royal ride, Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available at islandetickets.com. Lewis Appliances, corner Tragrid Road and Edward Street. Caribbean Jewelers, Trinity Mall. Mandarin Mini Mart St. Anne's. A. Moses and Sons, 181 Tragrid Road. Quase Supermarket, Calcutta Road number 2. Drive Restaurant and Bar, Mukarapa Road. New Car and Auto Shop, West Mall. First Priority Music, Gulf City Mall. SNSR Food Center, Princesstown. Quase Best Price, St. Mary's Junction. Romaines Hardware, Marava. Cascade Minimart. Kelly Supermarket, Digger Mountain Main Road. The Unit Trust Agency in West Mall. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queens Royal College Christmas 3-car raffle.
It's Christmas time, and with your family you'll spend every evening watching a movie on WESN. The classics that fill your heart with merriment and cheer as we celebrate together the most wonderful time of the year.
This is my island in December.
This Christmas, WESN celebrates with you as the content capital brings the big screen classics.
Yes!
Gather your family and tune in to WESN from December 1st to 31st at 8 p.m. nightly for We Christmas Movie Classics.
Santa's coming to town! Ah! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him!
Only on WESN, Content Capital.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
I'm back to talk about a WESN content capital, and not all jobs are created equal, right? The working conditions that might be beyond the pale for a teacher or an office clerk or a human resource manager, well, usually things like gunfire is beyond the pale for them. But certain services, protective services, danger is technically part of the job. That's what you, in theory, sign up for. If you didn't think that it could happen to you in those jobs, then I would question your judgment and the capacity by which you should be taking such a high-stress job that requires good judgment, right? But of course, it came out recently, and I did speak about it, but I'm not going to let it go because Ashraf is here. I'm not going to let it go because to protect and serve except when there's mosquitoes, that is now the new motto of the TTPS apparently. Because I still can't get over, right, the commissioner that wears Punisher on his arm. I don't know about you, but I think Frank Castle will be personally insulted if he hears that there's a police commissioner that wears his logo on his arm that ran from the sound of mosquitoes. Somehow, we expect our police to run towards the sound of gunfire, but we must be understanding the sound of buzzing mosquitoes, now they're going to run from that. Ashraf.
Ouch, 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 ouch.
And I actually, believe it or not, I did not really take pleasure bringing up the topic, but when you look at it,
but you see,
there's no way to like defend it.
Honestly speaking, when I heard the comment, I was taken aback as the mosquitoes you're talking about.
Now, can this be a thing where he was making a joke and it was just a really bad joke?
I really hope it was just a sarcastic statement.
But the problem is like it goes too far now. You know what I mean?
But I really hope it was a sarcastic statement or something like that, because I cannot understand how that could be equated to what transpired.
Yeah.
Yes, you went into the location, saw the narcotics, saw it's on a vessel, no motor, nothing at all. You stood there, you stayed there for a certain period of time to oversee what was taken. They would have. They would have. They would have stayed there a certain amount of time. The question is whether or not that time was sufficient enough to
not just that, whether or not they did so stealthy enough to not disturb anyone observing
These are all speculative.
Right, yes.
These are all speculative. But the fact of the matter is that, yes, they did they made a judgment. What I'm saying is that there was a judgment call made in terms of whatever information and intelligence they had. Not wrong making a judgment call. I am simply saying the judgment call would have been, we spent sufficient amount of time on the items under surveillance, right? Mm-hmm. Based on the intelligence, you would know whether or not to remain or not to remain. That's what I'm saying. But to bring in the narrative of the reason why you left is because of mosquitoes, and I'm simply saying this. Let us be very clear. The units that went on this exercise that has been quoted by the Commissioner of Police are trained for these type of incursions. They are trained for this type of environments. They would have expected that they are going into this environment that mosquitoes are part and parcel of this whole environment. You had the issues of possible trap guns that could have been inside there also. You have the risk of caimans that could have been in that swampy area. You brought up the issues of mosquitoes. That I am saying, Sean, I don't know what was it thinking behind bringing that up, but it didn't come out.
Because
it didn't all go well.
And my thing is, even if it was a joke, it's a real question. It's a real concern that the public has. All of these confiscations of all these drugs and the firearm caches throughout the last few years, just about no one has been arrested, it seems. What is the explanation for that? Disarming a situation with humor, yes, it's a tactic, but I would say this is probably one of the least effective utilizations of that tactic that I have ever seen.
I cannot...
This is assuming it's a joke.
Well, we don't know. We don't know. But I am simply saying that it could, you could have said
anything else?
Something much more logical in the context that you made the decision was made by the officers in there, right? Based on the intelligence, based on information, that there was no need to remain there for a lengthy time because there would not have been any value anymore, right? So it is better to come out. But the public was asking, because you see, the thing about it is that this is all about a reaction towards the comments of the public. Because in a number of these cases where these large cash, these large quantities and the large caches of firearm ammunition and narcotics, nobody was actually being arrested. And the question always been, why you all didn't remain to catch somebody? Now, from my experience, it is always, we always look at it from when you're watching a movie. In real life, it don't work like that. There are several risks associated that will weigh your options immediately. You have risk, you're putting the officers, some officers may be placed in much more risky situations, remaining in an environment where it can turn out to be much more confrontational than achieving the objective of removing the items off the area.
Right, because if you flood the area with police to secure the area, well then obviously no one's coming back. So conversely, if you're not going to flood the police in the area and there's a confrontation, then you might get into a 50-50 situation at best.
And the environment that they were in is not an environment that is comfortable to many persons. Because you have to be very, we have to be very cautious about this, the environment. Remember, the environment is not mosquito alone. There were several other areas.
Well, here's the thing. Forget the dangers or the comforts of the environment. The practicality. If this was a warehouse in East Port of Spain or Woodbrook or Diego Martin or the East-West Corridor, right, then it would be a lot easier to mask your approach, to hide the observation. When we talk about a swamp, right, it's very easy probably for the criminals to be spooked because, well, we're just not accustomed to any activity here.
Any activity during the
right? So one cop could go in alone and find it, and that might have been enough to say, oh, well, they found it, let's run, right? That could have been an explanation. That would have been better than mosquitoes.
And that is what I'm saying. So sometimes we have to be careful with the choice of words.
Let me put it this way now. Think about this. This is the Commissioner of Police, right? This is the golden boy. This is the guy who we put our hopes in when it comes to law enforcement. And this is him exercising judgment of a similar vein to the Minister of Homeland Security when he gives us a half-baked analogy that doesn't mean anything, goes nowhere, and we have no idea even where his starting point was. I wonder if Minister Alexander is rubbing off on the Commissioner in that regard and is not taking communication seriously enough. Because I would argue, and this is not the first time I said this week, and it's not the only issue I've said this about, but literally saying nothing would have been better than saying dengue. Literally saying nothing would have been better than saying dengue. Now, I don't know if you have anything else to add, because I actually like this to segue into the next topic.
Yeah, so the safest position in managing incidents of that nature, you have to be very cautious in how you say it. It would have been better to say that your intelligence, right, and you made a decision. That's it.
Because I could see as soon as they discovered this cache of marijuana, the criminals knew.
Obviously.
Like, again, you could have sent one guy in, unless he was undercover, and even if he was undercover, now you have the risk they might attack him, right? Yeah. You send one guy in, there's a very good chance that you spook the criminals and they're going to run, right? But now let's segue to the next thing, because, you know, the home invasion bill has been assented to.
Oh, yeah.
And here's the thing, here's the thing, right? I would say that the point of this is, they say it's to give you the chance to protect yourself. Some might say, no, we had to do our job, the police's job and the national security's job for them. Because, I mean, you know, not everybody heeds the Ministry of Health when they say don't have stagnant water. So when you have mosquitoes around your house, you might not get a police response. And now I understand why we have stand your ground laws. Now I understand, because too many people probably have mosquitoes in their home. And the police might get dengue. We can't have that.
Ow,
you know?
ow, ow. That's a good one. That's a good one.
So listen, if you want to live in dengue, you have the right to defend yourself. Actually, I did say when the story broke, the criminals are going to have a new tactic. They're going to have open containers of water around every and anything, and all of a sudden, all the enterprise will be secure. But that's the jokes. The reality, of course, the stand your ground laws are passed. That's a whole other kettle of fish.
That is a whole other kettle of fish, and I was reading some of the information in it, and I took time to go through some of them. I think what is very, very crucial is that persons and the public need to educate themselves about this legislation.
Well, hit me with a few points.
You need to. So one of the areas we talk about, they say you can defend your home.
Right.
And we talk about a definition of curtilage. When you look at the definition of curtilage, it speaks about all the property in and around your home, whether inclusive, whether fenced or not, whether you occupy it or whether you occupy it temporarily or otherwise. So you have a shed behind your house. That's hypothetically, I have a shed behind my house where I have let's say I have a garden behind our house or my estate, right? And let me just extend it on I have an estate. The estate may not be fenced, it may be open estate, but I have a little shed in the back of the house where I normally go there when I'm tending to my crops. That is part and parcel of your home.
Right.
If anybody enters that estate, you have the right to defend yourself in that context. So you have to read that legislation and understand the context in which it is being presented. It also gives guidance as to what, for an investigation, if a matter should be, if a matter has to go before the court where somebody has been charged under the act, where the courts have guidance in what they have to look at.
Right.
Right. So, not because people should be jumping up in the bandwagon and jumping on the road and saying the legislation passed, everything is going to be okay. No, it is not going to be okay. There are guidelines in it. There are rules that you need to follow. There are certain information in it, or I should say narratives in it. You need to understand what it means, what reasonable force means to you, what inherent danger means, who can defend and how you can defend, the circumstances and how you should be able to. So it is not just saying that the law is passed, I can act and the law will defend me. No, it is not as simple as that. You need to understand what the law states, because there are some areas that you need to be very careful about. I don't have the full legislation on me, and if we have to go through some of the areas, we could go through that at some point in time.
Right.
Probably early next year, as this it now rolling out. A lot of persons will think. So it is very interesting to understand how it is written and the impact it is going to have. It is going to have an impact. It has an impact on both sides. The criminal elements may also be familiar with the context of stand your ground.
Yes.
Not the law, but the hearing, people are going to stand their ground. So they may come with more force that is that.
Well, they're already coming in large numbers.
So they would up their ante because they are in their anticipation. They anticipate a response or a greater resistance.
Now, there are always criminals who you resist. They will make the business decision. I'm not about to deal with that. I'm going to run, right?
Exactly.
It could be an old granny with a cutlass. I'm not about to escalate things. I don't want that smoke, especially in the past.
Yes.
Now maybe it's not quite so widespread. But I'll say this. What has the police technically been selling to us for the last several years? Because when it comes to police shootings, and to some extent the governments of the day agree with this because they've never said anything to counter this. When we hear about police shootings, oh, well, they fired first.
Yes.
Right? And we want to assume that to be true, but we need to understand the implications of that statement. Because when you have multiple police officers trying to arrest the guy, and he's looking at multiple police officers with their guns pointed at him, and he's like, you know what? I think I'm going to shoot at them.
So,
but my point is, if that's not going to give him pause, where he's at a disadvantage, and it's the police, trained people to be in this gunfight, you mean to tell me that when 8 fellas roll up on a house, some 50-something-year-old father that has to try to worry about his family and he only has 30 bullets, he's going to intimidate them to back off?
So we have to look at it in all context. But at the end of the day, over the years, and the police continue to inform the public that you need to make yourself hard targets.
Yes.
Secure your premises. Here the words they're using, secure your premises. That is your property. Defend your own place, right? Implement security measures to defend your property, to secure yourself. You are actually being put in a position to stand your ground. Persons don't understand that this is not nothing, because putting in security measures is like standing the ground.
The first step to stand your ground is, oh, you guys trying to break in my house in the shadows? Book, turn on the light.
Right. So you have now, everything that you put in your place is in keeping with trying to establish security of your property.
Now, for the sake of time, I just want to go this whole concept of reasonable force. Here's my issue with it. I don't know if we've practiced it enough to say that we have a diverse slate of legal results, judgments, to say that we could say what reasonable force is, at least in multiple circumstances. This law is relatively new. To some extent, in the past, you would have had a duty of care even for people who are trespassing, right? Depending on your interpretation of the law. And reasonable force is, because of the nature of conflicts, it's subjective.
It is subjective,
right?
And it is subjective, and each incident must be taken on its own.
Yeah.
So then you could determine reasonability.
Now, what if some old cat burglar break into a man's house, man sees that, man has a cutlass, and literally just, chops him up. The cat burglar might be 5'5", because a smaller guy easier to sneak around, right? 100 pounds less than the person, has no weapons on them, made no threatening moves, like all of the.
So you see that.
And essentially now the guy saying, but I thought it was reasonable, so just kill him as soon as I see him.
So when you read the legislation, it speaks not only about reasonability of the type of force that you use, but it talks about inherent danger.
Some people who are untrained might think, hey, stranger in my house, I feel inherently in peril.
That is why it is very important as this legislation has been assented, it is now law. We don't take it wholesale and just say it is now law. It has to be dissected in the context of the law enforcement personnel as well as homeowners, which this law is directed towards, for them to get an understanding of what that law means.
Let's go to the stage scenario. I think these police are fake. A minister
you didn't need to
made statements.
Right. So you didn't have to have stand your ground legislation for fake officers. It was already existing.
Okay.
Because even if you outside of stand your ground, who was not on the table, you were of the opinion that this individual is not a police officer, you can still you could have still take appropriate actions to defend your property.
Now, I understand what you're saying and why you're saying it. It just makes me very nervous because I feel as though we don't have all our ducks in a row where situations like that, we could be reasonably guaranteed, which again, the irony of using the word in this context is not escaping me, right? Reasonably guaranteed that if someone is doing things like this, it's not because they're going off the rails or they're cuckoo or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I understand there's a legitimate concern about fake police. I also understand that there will be some smart men that will use that as an excuse to fight with police.
With every law, there are persons who try to counter it. Unfortunately, this law will have to be tested.
Right. Yes.
It has to be tested, and I don't know, and only then where you would actually see how the court uses the guidelines set out in the law and how it presented. Then we would understand really and truly how many loopholes exist in it unless it has been tested. As it is, it seems, and I wonder, and I'm sorry for using the word, it seems reasonable enough for somebody to opportunity to defend yourself. It gives, I'll give you a wide context in how you can defend yourself, but at the end of the day, there is so much can come out from an incident that you cannot predict, right? And it's very subjective. And only when an incident that takes place and this law has been applied, then and only then would we be really understand the full context of how the Stand Your Ground and Home Invasion Act and that law is really utilized.
We have we need to move on, but we have a comment with regards to law enforcement that we should take. Ouch. We have another comment. The police commissioner is afraid of dengue for his officers. Should doctors also not be placed in situations with dangerous diseases? I mean, that's a good point. The doctors are in great danger of dangerous diseases.
And there are more.
Let's put it this way. Most of us think about sexually transmitted diseases as, well, that's the only time you're at risk. But doctors who deal with blood, who might have to go into open wounds, deal with open wounds, and if they're not careful, they themselves might then get open wounds at the same time and run the risk of being infected. You know what I mean? Where does it end? Where does it end? I just didn't realize. I mean, you know what? This is maybe why the maritime borders are open, because the Coast Guard men, they are run the risk. It's dangerous to be on the seas, right? We can't have that, We can't have the Coast Guard go in boats for extended period of times. They might fall out of the boats, and then something bad might happen, And in that case, we need to commend the exceptional bravery of those who operate the ferries, because they take, it's Alaskan craft fishermen and our ferry service. They take all the risk, but our Coast Guard, we need to be understanding. We need to be understanding. That's why the regiment doesn't actually go any bush and patrol, because they probably have similar dengue concerns as the TPS. Because this is the thing, this is the other thing. For national security, because I believe the Minister of National Security was there at the same time. I'm sorry, I'm revisiting the subject. But if you want to give us the excuse that the police have to worry about dengue, I'm like, but there are other services though services who are not, implied to be limited to urban and suburban environments. What about them? And that goes to the wider apparatus. And why the minister, what's the excuse for that? If the regiment is worried about dengue for, well, then really and truly, what are we doing? We have another comment to take. That's off topic, but I want to take this comment now. This is about the rental. What about homes that have businesses? You have the business downstairs. I think you would basically get the two separate taxes, right? If it's a residence that is renting, you will have the tax for that, and then the commercial application for the business downstairs. If you're living above your business, right, and for whatever reason it's a rental, well, this is the thing. If you are the renter, right, the landlord is paying the tax either way, right? And if you own it outright, then there will be no tax. This is only on rental right now.
Yep.
Now, I wanted to go because, this is one of those topics. Close out the week. Two things happen. One, if you could just go to the next topic. Well, yes, two things happen. One, we open our airport to United States Armed Forces. And two, they took a sanctioned tanker and blockaded Venezuela to sanction tankers, right? Because from what I understand, Venezuela escorted tankers out of their waters, but those tankers were not sanctioned, right? Or those tankers were legal, and there was no reason to stop them.
Yeah.
They had no legal reason to stop them. So now we're kind of caught in the middle, where our prime minister is viewed by some as being part of it, while she's trying to still claim that she's not part of it. And some of it I will accept, but she did say we're not supporting regime change. And I just don't really see how a further deployment of American personnel that might require the use of multiple airports in the region is still meant to deal with cocaine and marijuana and pirogues. Like, I don't really see the need for more assets and more logistical support if all we're doing is going after pirogues and drug dens.
Well, no, we may not know, and we do not know how the U.S. the military operates. I mean, yes, they may be, because based on what I was hearing, that it is part of their changing of the personnel and resources and logistics to bring in place. I mean, yeah, who knows? They may be rotating their staff.
I'm pretty sure that a naval deployment doesn't change over in three months.
I wouldn't put my hand on the block for that.
Yeah, I'm pretty, like, aircraft carrier deployments are like 7 months.
Fair enough. I mean, if you're so familiar with the United States, and you want to state it, how would it state it? So I am simply saying that if this is part of the logistics arrangements, and we gave permission for them to bring their, the thing about it, when they do come, and we did. The question is, the other aspect of it is this. Sometimes when you share information, you have more questions to answer about information. Mm-hmm. So you put out the information and say that the permission was granted for them to utilize, right? More questions come in because why, when, who authorized that, what are they going to do? If it didn't say anything at all, you still have problems. So it's either yes, it's either you share or you don't share. I think the sharing of the information it was the best option, because persons would have seen this thing and would have raised more questions. The narrative that the Prime Minister gave, the statement that he made, was fixed. We could agree or disagree on whether our opinion is otherwise towards it. Until we see something different.
Well, because it kind of makes the whole comments last week when the commissioner waded in on the radar was here to get the drugs. It kind of makes that also ring hollow. That's the problem. Because more and more, on MEU, they deploy for 9 months at a time.
Okay.
Right? Wait, no, sorry. There's a 15 months, 6 months, 6 months. 9 months is the prep, 6 months is the actual time at sea. It's just one of those things where...
Yeah, but Trinidad and Tobago have mosquitoes.
Well, the US is not the TTPS.
So they may not want to stay.
Yeah, the US is not the TTPS.
Okay, so they could deal with the mosquitoes.
They were in Vietnam.
Okay, so then we could say 6 months.
They could deal, yeah, 6 months. But they're at sea.
Yeah.
How much mosquitoes do you have in the boats?
We don't know. But the reality, and all fun and joke, the thing about it is that this is the dilemma that you normally face. Sharing information, people don't, because of the sides that you're on.
Well, here's the problem. I think ultimately the Prime Minister was giving us a narrative, and now there's a big hole in the narrative. I wouldn't say that the narrative is proven to be untrue. But when she said, we are not supporting regime change, we are not going to be a logistical base for regime change, but we already have 2 carriers, an amphibious carrier and a super carrier in the region. So you don't need an air base.
You see, we are and that's what I'm saying. Many of the persons in the public are listening to what is transparent on social media and other media outlets in the United States as to what those assets are for and what they are normally utilized for. The assumptions that we are making here.
No, I'm
not talking about you.
No, but I'm going over what the Prime Minister said.
Yes, but I'm saying, right. I'm saying what the Prime Minister is saying is always being questioned by social media and the assumptions of other media houses and how they view it. And all I'm putting out here is this, Sean. I will reserve some of my judgments based on what the statements the Prime Minister put out. I don't have all the information to make any other assessments.
Well,
right? But and I know where you're going with. I understand the demand. But some of the statements that the Prime Minister made, the actions surrounding it is kind of questionable.
You see, the problem is when they send the ARG, right? Say you had the small carrier, you had all the escort ships, maybe more escorts are necessary, but okay, you want to have radar coverage and the like, right? It's still overkill at that point to deal with drug smuggling via pirogues, right? Okay. But you know what? It's not as though the US Navy has smaller assets in numbers that it could send, right? So it is what it is. The amphibious carrier gives them a platform by which they could conduct air operations. I would have thought since it comes with a ready-made package of Marines and helicopters, you could make arrests, but who am I to judge, right? Mm-hmm. The legal justifications have not been tested in courts. But then they deployed a super carrier. Then they got Dominica to say, you could use our airports and runways. Then they got us to say they could use our airports and runways. Then also there's the deployment of the radar, which actually, in my mind, is like the least important thing of all of these things, because all of these things, besides the radar is maybe in support of it, basically it's pointing to more resources being deployed and committed. So that has a bill, right? Not just in terms of money, but opportunity cost. There's only about 3 carriers active at any one time. They have carriers that they could push out as a reserve if necessary, but you have the Middle East, you have Southeast Asia, you have the Gulf, because whatever the Houthis, whenever they want to act crazy and take shots at ships, and then Somali pirates. You also have the North Atlantic and the Baltic, because there's a whole war going on in Europe right now, right? So to devote a carrier here, that's a big deal. So they've escalated the assets, and now this new agreement with us and Dominica basically implies we need logistical support because there's potentially more deployments coming. And I'm like, we're just seeing the side, and I think Trump basically was quoted to have said, or he said in the press, you know, the largest armada, and he said something to imply more deployments coming, right? I think we're long past the point where this is necessary to sink pirogues.
And I agree.
And that's why the Prime Minister's, because she was very consistent, she's not supporting regime change, but that narrative has a big hole in it now.
However, the narrative is not one that any Prime Minister of this country, whether current or anybody, could really make on behalf of another state.
No, I understand that. But she is talking about what we support, what her administration supports, right? And I get it. It's not as though she could say, well, yeah, you know, they told us that they're going to do regime change, so it is what it is. It's not like she could say that. But I'm just saying, like, there probably would have been a better way to not be so absolute on this. We don't support this, but we support that. But then all of a sudden it looks as though you support the thing that you say you're not going to support.
And that is what I'm saying. The appearance of it, in some light, I know it's off balance because you're hearing a statement, but you're seeing some actions that the actions itself stating is not what we're looking at.
Because
right?
I could see where the Prime Minister basically intended to never support regime change, but then was compelled to agree to this, right? I don't know what the details would be. My point is, she set the tone on the narrative that she was giving out. Forget what Americans are giving out. And this is the thing where, I mean, if she had any indicator, and a lot of people would say, well, there should be obvious indicators that, look, they want regime change, right? Why then, you know, craft this absolute narrative that you basically can't stick to or enforce?
Well, this is where
this is where the conspiracy theories are going.
Right. So this is where sometimes and like I said, when you're dealing with crisis management, communication is important. You set the tone for further communication. If you put yourself in a proverbial box by type of communication that you sent out earlier, there is no wiggle room to add, right? To add to it. You must always be able to add, not take away. You can't take away what you already said.
Right.
So, based on what was transpiring, a narrative came out. There's no way you can change it anymore because the narrative was already there. So the maneuvering in terms of crisis management is how now you take that same narrative that you have and how could you lessen the impact or share more information. Now, sharing information as to what is happening with the airspace and the new aircrafts that are coming and going in terms of logistical changes and things. That is opening more. That is adding more questions, or I should say, it is fueling the conspiracy theories that, hey, listen to me, this administration and the government of Trinidad and Tobago is supporting regime change. It may not be. It's just that they may be just supporting the logistical aspects of it. They still are not. We are still not in the position to say we want to support regime change. No, we may. This is just me. This is not the government of Trinidad and Tobago. This is just me. I may be comfortable with regime change, but the manner in which regime change is going to take place, I may not be comfortable with that. So I might be supportive of regime change, but I can't say I'm supporting regime change, right? Because I don't want to say I'm supporting regime change because the manner in which it's going to take place.
Yes, that's a blanket statement, and you are not necessarily supporting it in such a general way.
Holistically. So I think that we are between a rock and the hard place in terms of communication and this whole situation.
Ironically, this is where spin doctoring is actually supposed to work. Yeah. You don't spin things to try to hide and avoid responsibility and transparency. But at times like this, it's about what you say and what you don't say, right? What you say commits you. What you imply does not commit you. Because the thing is, it would have probably been best if the Prime Minister, one, focused on the anti-drug aspects without the kill them all talk, because the kill them all talk then could translate into, yeah, regime change. If I'm happy with just killing all the drug dealers, I should be happy with going after Maduro and taking him out. Right? And you don't even want that implied link. But then now when it came to the question of regime change, to start off by saying regime change is never easy. It comes with a lot of risks. This is not something that we would easily support, even with good reason, right? But not to commit to say, I support or don't support. Just to point out that you acknowledge that this is a tricky, risky, dangerous situation, and not one that you would ever want to undertake lightly. Point that out without committing yourself to one direction or the other, right? In part because I would argue a lot of these situations are so subjective in their own right. And that to say that you want to commit yourself to a course of action, right? Well, what if the situation is that bad and they need regime change? Or what if the situation is not that bad and regime change is cost too much? But you make an assumption either way, right? So
it's I do not envy the decision making.
Well, I want to ask, again, to what extent this is an unprecedented situation for our national security apparatus, and it should be at least partially understandable why they are not necessarily equipped to handle this 100%.
It is an unprecedented situation, and those who don't want to accept it, this is not about UNC, PNM, past administration, previous administration, KPB, or Dr. Rowley, or how they would treat the situation. This is a situation that, no matter how you look at it, it is unprecedented for any administration. And I cannot say that if the past administration was here, they would have dealt with it differently. I do not know what would have been the narrative and how it would have been messaged.
I suspect Dr. Rowley would not have said kill them all. That's the one thing. That like those obvious things.
We know that he may use certain languages.
Yeah, he might have had his own vision. Yes,
exactly. So, but I'm saying I would not put myself in a position to even try to say what Dr. Rowley would say or what our current Prime Minister has said. They would have known. They knew, or should say, it was in a position they made the comments. Whether they made the comments, and the comments has consequences, and this is the consequences of the comments. Always remember, no comment is a comment.
Yeah.
No comment is a comment.
But at least no comment doesn't commit you.
However, it all depends on how you say no comment to a certain context.
Right.
Because if you ask me a question and I give you a no comment, I didn't agree or disagree with it. I said no comment. So you can also say to me.
Now that's a hard way to do it. What I mean to say, that's a very harsh.
Yes.
But a softer way is to say, well, I am not able to comment on it at this time due to the sensitive nature. It wouldn't be responsible of me.
Good.
Which is something that local politicians have done for other things. I don't know why we didn't do it here.
So I am saying that this is unprecedented. This current situation is unprecedented. There is no rule book for us to follow.
I want to go a step further on how unprecedented it is. This situation could be one of the first indicators, not the first, because I do think you could either trace it back to the aftermath of COVID or at the very latest, the war in Ukraine. Because the war in Ukraine now kind of shifted political perception of diplomacy, peace, and how state actors are going to act, right? The world order is changing post-COVID. Globalization, global trade, it's not quite the same anymore.
Nope.
Right? We were getting rich off of these systems, but now all of a sudden we're like, I don't know if we like these systems anymore. China and America want a divorce when it comes to their economic relationship. As much as Trump wants to do it for America, apparently Xi Jinping wants to do it for China. And one of the things that some people have said is that the days of trying to play off each side off of each other and having a neutral position might be over.
It is.
And at some point, you have to pick a side, because if you don't pick a side, you run the risk of everybody's abandoning you, because you're trying to be... I think the old story is the bat didn't want to choose if it was on the side of the land animals or the birds, so eventually they both rejected him.
So you remember in school, when we come out to play, they appoint two captain and they say, pick a side?
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes they start to pick all the way, and then you end up you always say, would I get picked first or last? Would I get picked first or last? Sometimes you end up with one person who you don't want to be picked on at either side, and you'll be placed on the sidelines.
Yeah.
That is the reality. That is the reality is. There's no choice, there's no good or the best choice. There's a choice that was made. And the choice was in the interest of you weigh certain options. The the situation in Palestine and Israel, if Trinidad and Tobago stand up against either party, or made a statement against any party, if you supported what the actions of Israel, would it be said that we are supporting genocide? If we supported Palestine, what we will say we are supporting how the Palestine, what we are saying, we're supporting what was taking place and what happened to Israel.
What the terrorism of Hamas?
Yeah, to Hamas.
Potentially.
So
yeah.
The question is that which side you're on? Everybody supported what was everybody gives support of Israel to act based on what will happen to them, but they are not supporting what is currently in the current environment of the people of Palestine.
But also, and that video that I showed earlier is an example of it. There's a lot of it's a low-hanging fruit anti-American sentiment, but I would make the case that most people would not want to live in certain countries once certain things are tested, like Russia. Once the war in Ukraine happened, you couldn't protest about it.
No, you could not.
Right? Now, I mean, we take it for granted with regards to being able to protest things, even though we don't do it anymore, apparently. When is the last time we protested anything in any meaningful way? But look at when they had the Black Lives Matter protests. Now, what happened with that was, it was just after the protests on the lockdown.
Yeah.
And my thing was, with the protests on the lockdown, it was a very ethical head scratcher, because they're protesting the very thing that's telling them that they can't protest. And ethically, how do you justify, well, you can't protest the thing that you're protesting on because the thing that you're protesting against says you can't protest. Like, that was just one of those things. I did not envy anybody in authority, but for the sake of public safety, I would have leaned on the side of, maybe we should not allow these protests happen. Then BLM protests happened, or some people would say it was more than just protests. And my whole point was, yeah, we still have a health pandemic, and maybe this is not the best idea. I took a lot of flack for that, by the way. Oh, but just so you know, I took a lot of flack for not agreeing with the BLM protest. There are a lot of black businesses that got destroyed from that protest. That bothered me. But I'll leave that there. I don't want to adjudicate that situation any further. Why did I bring that up? Oh my gosh, too many tangents. But my point is, like, you have to take a side, right? At some point, you have to take a side on something. And just, we allow people, you know.
You have to stand for something.
But, okay, sorry, this is my point. You can't protest in certain countries.
No, you cannot.
So as much as we want to index these things, you got, look, private business, for some reason, a whole set of oligarchs in Russia ended up dead once this war started. And then now in China, a whole set of billionaires all of a sudden got real silent once they started to shift away from being as free market capitalists as they were before COVID, right? To what extent do people in the US want to live in situations where at some point in time, the freedoms you take for granted might not exist, right?
So
there was one woman that moved to Russia. She got hit with racism. Russia was the land of great things for her because she was so welcome, whatever, right? But when the cameras were off in her own apartment building, she got hit with racism and threats and violence. I think she was beaten. And the authorities did nothing about it. And now she regrets moving there. So my thing is, it's not to say that Russia is the great evil and China is the great evil and America is the good guys. My thing is, everybody has their own agenda.
So true.
And to say that one is morally superior than the other, a lot of the times is not the case when you look at look, America goes to war, bad things happen in war. No matter how morally justified you are to engage in that war, bad things will be done in your name by your people, because that is the nature of war. That's why regime change, one of the reasons why regime change is rightfully feared. Right? So I'm not saying that they decided the angels, but I think on this issue, the low-hanging fruit is to vilify them. But it's like, that's the country where you can protest. You can protest during a pandemic where the public health risk says you're not supposed to protest, right? And you take that for granted. But We are in TNT, we follow American culture, we consume American products, we consume American media happily. We trade with America, and some people say, well, we can get other trade partners. It's not that simple. It's not that easy. If that was the case, Europe would stop buying Russian oil and gas faster than you could say shish kebab.
But we also try to have a complete pillar of everything else. So you want to follow some things of America follow. You want to follow some things that Europe follow. You want to follow some things that the Caribbean follow. So you want to follow little pieces of it, everything like that. It don't work like that. Systems are systems. If you want to follow a complete system, you have to use the whole system, because the system is only as good as when you implement it. So we can't have, when it comes to our laws, we cannot follow British laws and want to behave like American laws.
Yeah, yeah.
It would not work.
Yeah.
Because the American law system is completely different to the British law system.
We can't want to be like Singapore, but not do the things that Singapore did. Not just the easy stuff, the hard stuff.
And from school environment, from children in schools, from tender age, they have been cultured in their culture and how they do for level of responsibility, what discipline, respect for their, whether we agree with it or not.
Authority and their peers.
And their peers. We have an issue. Just imagine, in our school environment, if on a day the school decides we want to do a cleanup of our school, how many parents could say, I didn't never send my child in school to clean up the school? That is your environment. They would not allow that. They would not. How much would we protest about what is taking place in the school?
Meanwhile, in Japan, the students, they manage certain aspects of the school, and one of that thing is cleaning the classrooms. And I don't just mean picking up paper.
Yes.
It is mopping, sweeping. Every day.
They maintain the environment that they operate within.
And that's the thing. You don't get litter in Japan.
Right?
You know, and apparently in Japan, public waste baskets and bins are very rare. So if in TNT, or even say New York, you had a situation where there's no public waste baskets, there's no public bins, what will people do? They'll just throw whatever anyway. But in Japan, the culture of being responsible for cleanliness is so strong, they walk with their trash.
And even in our twin island of Trinidad and Tobago, sometimes you go to Tobago, and I have to commend Tobagonians and how they keep their environment. It is now becoming similar to that of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
It was not like that anymore.
Yeah.
So you have to, we want...
Price of progress.
We want progress. We want pieces of it.
So, and then it goes just to this point. The New World Order, you might need to pick a side. You can't have your cake and eat it too, right? You can't be friends with everybody, especially when they are becoming more and more antagonistic towards each other. You can't, think about it. If you have a falling out in the friend group, most people do not have the ability to navigate a way to stay friends with everybody. When there's a falling out with two other parties.
You just end up in a serious problem.
In fact, and if you try too hard, you might end up losing both friends from both sides.
And they may become friends and you might.
At the end, yes.
Yeah.
At the end. So, right now, there's a reason why Europe, their threat is Russia. They thought trade would have negated that threat. Not so much. You know, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, they're looking at China. They're looking at America to be on their side. We trying to do this thing where we're friendly with everybody. But at some point, their competition, which is very much active for the last several years, if not since forever, at some point, we are going to get caught in a rock and a hard place if we're not careful. So I don't have an issue with the Prime Minister picking a side. How she does it, that's what we've debated a little bit, right? But picking a side, and the side of that's a neighboring country, that's where we get a lot of our food from, that's where we get a lot of our commercial products from, that's where our economy is tied to with who we export our goods to. It seems fairly obvious to me, right? And I might be a little old school, but I rather be on the side of the Western democracy that more closely matches our own system of government and politics, because it's easier to understand and agree with than, say, a non-democracy nation that has a very different culture to ours.
I just say unprecedented. I think the Prime Minister in this term is probably would have been is going to face the hardest challenge in her political career thus far, because of what is taking place between this.
Well, there's always a chance they pack up their stuff and go home. I doubt that's going to happen. But yes, once it goes how it's going, it's just going to add more and more.
So,
but I will say this, so I really wish she didn't say kill them all. I'm sorry. That's the one I wish she didn't say. I kind of understand. But that's just not the thing that should have been said.
We can't take it back, but it's already there.
Can't take it back. All right, thanks, Ashraf, for joining me once again. Thanks to the commenters. Didn't really take calls because I wanted to close out the week. There was a lot of stuff to get to, trying to fight certain narratives and hopefully could maybe get people to think from a different perspective. You don't have to share our specific opinions. Now, we have to close things here. 10 questions is up next with Anthony Johnson. Stay tuned for that. And of course, as always, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Stay safe. It's nice to be nice. Don't ever forget that, especially when people have different opinions to you. Still be nice towards them, because we are still one country. And with that said, have a good weekend. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Win a brain car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College. You have a chance of winning a luxurious royal ride, Ford Ranger. Draw a date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available at islandetickets.com. Lewis Appliances, corner Tragrid Road and Edward Street. Caribbean Jewelers, Trent City Mall. Mandarin Mini Mart St. Anne's. A. Moses and Sons, 181 Tragrid Road. Quaysay Supermarket, Calcutta Road number 2. Strive Restaurant and Bar, Mukarapa Road. New Car and Auto Shop, West Mall. First Priority Music, Gulf City Mall. SNSR Food Center, Princesstown. Quaysay Best Price, St. Mary's Junction. Romaines Hardware, Maraval. Cascade Minimart. Kelly Supermarket, Digger Mountain Main Road. The Unit Trust Agency in West Mall. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queens Royal College Christmas 3-car raffle.